Alright. Hello, this is Tyler with XenoChat. I'm here today with Justin, my co-host.
Hello, everybody.
And we have a returning guest today from our Shion episode is David.
Hey, I'm back, guys.
And we got a new guest, and that is Owen.
Hello! Happy to be here.
Alright. So yeah, well, the topic today, we kind of, a little while ago, I held a poll on Twitter about which topic we should cover next, and the next topic we're covering today is Xeno and religion. But before we get into that, let's just kind of go into our usual stuff. So we usually start with discussing any news, that's relevant to Monolith Soft, lately, and I think one of the things we wanted to bring up was there's a producer of the Warriors Orochi series. They were interested in making a Xenoblade Warriors game or Xeno Warriors game.
I think this was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, what did everyone think about? I mean, I know it's not like official. He just said it would be like the characters would be right for it. But what did everyone think about that?
I mean, I think it could work. Xenoblade 2 especially, or actually X as well, or Cross rather. There's a lot of different fighting styles that can be represented into it, and I feel like most of the Xenoblade games give you situations that would lend itself well to that kind of gameplay, where you're just fighting a bunch of enemies on screen. You have all sorts of different fighting styles, doing all these cool, flashy super moves. So yeah, I mean, if they do it, hey, I'll play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, I was never really particularly interested in like the Dynasty Warriors style games.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when Hyrule Warriors got announced and came out, I kind of slept on it. I never touched it. So
that's good because now there's been 3 versions.
Really? Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a 3DS version and then there's a definitive Switch version. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel kind of gypped getting the Wii U version.
Same.
Ultra Max Plus.
Except
content.
Yeah, except I thought the Wii U version was actually really fun, or the Hyrule Warriors in general is kind of fun. So I'd be kind of interested to see what they would do.
I mean, the best part about those games is probably the music. We all know you want to hear those remixes.
That would be great. It's kind of funny, actually. Some friends of mine, specifically one, we were talking about this. We've been talking about this idea for months, and we've been throwing around the idea of like getting together to make a hypothetical Xeno Warriors roster about what we could imagine it being. So when this came about, we're just like, wait, weren't we just talking about this? Also, worth mentioning is that I believe I haven't read the article myself. I think there was also something about an Ys Warriors as well. Like he mentioned both possibilities.
Yeah, he mentioned Ys and Xeno.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, what?
I mean, I haven't played an Ys game yet, but both would definitely be interesting. I mean, Falcom I hear makes really good games.
If they ever do an Ys Warriors game, they need to have a battle system, or at least like an alternate mode where you can kill enemies just by running into them.
That would be fitting.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. Now, if they did a Xeno Warriors, so are we thinking it would just mostly be Xenoblade and not like Xenogears or Xenosaga?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm assuming so.
Absolutely.
Licensing. So,
well, I mean, it could.
We can
not even that. Just look at
Cosmos or somebody would be in there.
Yeah, I could imagine like a couple Xenosaga reps, but nothing for Xenogears.
I'm not even expecting Saga, to be honest. I mean, look at Fire Emblem Warriors.
Yeah.
How that was mostly Awakening and Fates.
Yeah. Those titles were very much dependent on like what was most successful. And I actually have Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
I have the special edition of Fire Emblem Warriors, and I really like the game. It's a lot of fun, but I think the representation could have been better.
That's my big issue with it too.
It's actually,
if they had. Oh, go on.
No, I just find it a dramatic increase in terms of the gameplay of Hyrule Warriors. I just think Fire Emblem Warriors is more fun to play. There's a lot more strategy involved. It's like you direct your units around the map, and like a traditional Fire Emblem game where you like you pick your units and you tell them where you want them to go, and so you're kind of multitasking everywhere. It's really cool.
I only played Dynasty Warriors on like PSP, PS2, I think, and like it was kind of repetitive for me, so I didn't stick with it.
Yeah.
So I just kind of every time a new game got announced, I was just like, yeah, well, that's money I don't have to spend, you know?
Yeah, I honestly hadn't heard about the series until Hyrule Warriors came out, and I got that on Wii U. I really enjoyed it. I got through quite a bit of it, and then Fire Emblem Warriors came out, and I wasn't intending to get it, but when I was pre-ordering, I was buying Mario and Rabbids. The guy at the cashier said, like, we still have special editions for this. I'm like, yeah, I'll pre-order that, so.
That's how I got my Tokyo Mirage Session Special Edition. The guy was just like, oh, we still have this, and nobody's buying it. You want it? Sure. I'll take it.
Yeah. I slept on that game for a long time, but I just picked it up this September, and I'm really enjoying it. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would... Well, I guess as the old Xeno fan, I would hope they at least like maybe include Cosmos or maybe do a Xenosaga like DLC thing, because I could definitely see like Xenoblade being the main focus.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
absolutely. Cosmos might be DLC, but again, it'll just be yet another game where we're only seeing Cosmos in.
Well, these games tend to focus on 3 campaigns. So for Hyrule Warriors, there was Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, and then there was in Hyrule Warriors was Awakening, Fates, and Shadow Dragon. So I can imagine this being like Xenoblade 1, 2, and X. But worth mentioning is that Fire Emblem Warriors did have a couple guest characters from other series. So like they had one from Fire Emblem Gaiden. They had Celica, which is known as Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. They also had Lyn from, I think that was the original Fire Emblem on GBA that came to America for the first one. So I don't think having like a singular or like a single exception would not be out of the picture, but it'd be primarily Xenoblade.
True. Which that would be. I mean, I'd be okay with that, like having the 3 different. Because I definitely would look forward to seeing how they would represent Cross, if like how they would go about doing that.
Yeah, I've talked to this with friends about this, because obviously it's like you want to get some of the villains, probably all the protagonists, but there's 18 protagonists in X, or 18 characters in X. So where do you draw the line there?
Exactly. Okay. So as for any other news, there was that
Smash Direct.
Oh. Yeah, the rumor.
Short confirmed. Woo!
Yeah, the leak that didn't come true.
Poor Cosmos.
Yeah,
poor Grinch.
Oh, but at least we got the Rex me costume, huh?
I'm more happy about the songs that are included than anything else. Just
same here.
More Xenoblade stuff is always good.
Yep.
You know what? I didn't check. Like, what songs are they like adding? Or
they're adding at least 2 or 3, I think. Like they're doing the battle theme and I think one of the boss theme. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I just read on Twitter actually like 10 minutes ago that like one of them was a remix or something. So that's cool.
Ooh.
I don't think X got any representation at all.
There was there was a Skell that's getting a spirit.
Oh really?
Wow.
Yeah. It's like the Formula Skull, I think.
Oh, the one that has there's a figure for that one, right?
Yeah, that one.
The
okay.
Formula ST.
Yeah.
You know, if Cross doesn't get any music in Smash, I blame the community for that one, for everybody complaining about the music.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, which is a pity, because Sawano makes really good music.
Yes. Yeah. I had a bad feeling that Cosmos rumor wasn't going to be true, but it's okay.
It was already up in the air, even if it was true, because a lot of people were arguing, oh no, it's like clouds or whatever. And
it was so stupid. People were like circling random things, like, oh, look at this.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I don't know what people expected, because, I mean, it was just a leak.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my coworkers said his hype for the game completely disappeared after the direct. I was like, what? But the game still looks really awesome. You shouldn't have...
still getting 70 characters.
Yeah, it's
it was just a really weird one. But I'm still excited for the game.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, Yeah, me too. Especially for the story mode, I'm kind of interested.
It actually looks really cool. Of course, Kirby's the only one that survives because he's Sakurai's character.
Sakurai
but
bias.
That's besides the point. Yeah, seriously, it was bad in Brawl, but
Well, I mean, another worth mentioning is that a lot of people are giving Sakurai a lot of crap about this, about like, oh, why don't you just make him a full character? A lot of people don't realize that when it comes to game development, everything is planned from the very beginning. And this,
Right.
First of all, Sakurai is a third party. He owns Sora, and Monolith is a second party. So the chances of them communicating is a very low chance. But Sakurai really likes Xenoblade too, so he did what he could. He did whatever he could in the game, and this is what we got.
I feel like Rex will be DLC.
Oh yeah, also Nia got a mean costume too. I'm not sure you guys are aware about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah.
And isn't Pyra supposed to be one of the spirits, or
Pyra, Tora, and Zeke are spirits. Yes. Zeke is genius because it's Cloud.
Mm.
I love that.
That works out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else can think of any other Mollisoft or Xeno related news?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right, then let's move on. Since Owen, you're new to the podcast, May, can you go into your how you got into the Xeno series and your background into it?
Yep. Okay, sure. So, so before you start, there's two things you need to understand. The first is, I was born 6 months before Xenoblade, Xenosaga Episode 1 came out in Japan. I'm 17.
Oh, man.
I am 17 years old, so I did not grow up with the Gears or the Saga games at all. As a matter of fact, second point is I wasn't really into games at all until the last 4 to 5 years, and that was when I started getting into games a lot more. I think my 6th grade year is when I started really getting into it with Wind Waker. So I first heard about Xeno in 2014. There were 3 major events in 2014 that happened for Xeno. I was there for the first one, and that was that Monolith's Project X was announced as Xenoblade Chronicles X, and that was the first time I had ever heard of the series.
Okay.
And so I was the name was in my mind, and I knew of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that summer, the new Nintendo 3DS was announced in Japan. And I remember this, and they had Xenoblade Chronicles 3D running on that, and I remember this specifically because, as I said, I was just getting into games that year, and that was the year I bought myself a 3DS, and so I remember being kind of ticked off about it. Because when you're a lot younger, you don't have a ton of cash, so...
Oh yeah, and you had to buy a 3DS just specifically for that game.
Exactly, so I remember that. Moot point, because now I have a new 3DS, but, I remember it, and so after that point, I started getting into more games, and I guess you could call me part of the Chugakonro generation, as in I found the first Xenoblade game through his Let's Play channel. I didn't really go super deep into it until after Smash Brothers had come out, because my brother really wanted me to look into his origins, because that was my thing at the time. I was looking into all these characters' origins, and so okay, sure. So I start Chuga's Let's Play, and I'm just captivated by the world and the ideas, and then that progresses, and then in 2015 is when I actually got a copy of the game on Wii. I found it at my family was on a road trip, and I just happened to be with a friend, and I was telling them about how great the story of Xenoblade was from what I'd seen from this Let's Play, and this person's like, you should go look and see if it's nearby. I'm just like, okay, so I go to GameStop's website, and it's literally 5 minutes away from where I'm standing. So I definitely bought that day, and I had to wait 7 days before playing it, but that was cool.
It wasn't ridiculous. It wasn't ridiculously expensive, was it?
It was about $50 or $60, so it's not like
oh, good.
Right.
This is when the game was at its height, $80, $90, even $100. So
Oh.
yeah,
So you got it at a good price.
yeah. And then 2015 was also when Xenoblade Chronicles X came out. And I had finished Xenoblade 1 at this point. And I knew it was going to be less story focused and more gameplay focused, and I was actually okay with that. And I remember I really had a lot of fun playing it, but whenever I look back on it, I don't remember it super fondly, but I still think it's a really good game, and I really respect it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly just like, the story doesn't feel like there's a lot of substance in it. It's a lot of style kind of stuff. The gameplay is fantastic, and it's a lot of fun, and the music is great. I remember hyping myself up to Black Tar before the game came out.
Man culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember
music in that game.
Yeah, it's fantastic music. I love it. And then I remember, and then the next encounter with Xeno really majorly was in 2016. Chugga Conroy mentions in his Let's Play how Xenoblade is very similar to a game called Xenogears, and I remember like, okay, so I'll look that up on Wikipedia, and like, it's this PS1 game. I'm like, I don't really have that console, but whatever. Kind of cool. Maybe I'll look into it one day. And there's this mall near my house, and I decided to go into this used game store, and they had for $60 a black label copy of Xenogears, full in box.
Oh, wow!
So I bought that.
$60 is a pretty good price.
So I bought this is December 2016. So I bought that, and I'm like, okay, I have it now. So my priority now is to get a PS2, so I can play it because PS2 has backwards compatibility, and then I could go on to Xenosaga later. Well, a month later, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced, so that plan went on hold for a sec. And all my priority went to getting Switch at launch, so I had the console to play it on. And then in September of 2017, which was last year, for my birthday, I got a PlayStation 2, so I was able to play Xenogears, finally. And I love it. This entire part between January and September was a weird part for me, where this is where I found the YouTube channel Meeks, who does a lot of Xeno lore symbolism analysis, which is actually why I'm here, because he started my wanting to look into the religion and symbolism and stuff like that. And I also found the Xenosaga wiki, and I went way too deep into that.
He found the rabbit holes, what he did.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Xenogear stuff too, so I looked through the entire Xenogears timeline, and I kind of blew my mind, but it also made me like really appreciate how complex you can make a story. I still actually think that in the Xenogears storyline, I think Xenogears Episode 1 is actually my favorite of the 5 that we know of. Which is the story about how humanity left Earth, colonized stars, fell into intergalactic war, developed Deus, and then eventually the ship crash landed, and that's where Episode 1 ends. I find that extremely fascinating. Just how they found like the Zohar in 2001 and stuff like that. So super cool. So I was finally able to play Xenogears, and I knew a lot of the plot points, and so when I played it through, everything actually made sense because I knew what I was looking for. I knew a lot of the backstory, but I didn't know a lot of the twists. So like things like the events that happen when you're fighting around the Zohar, I did not know about that. I knew that the final boss would eventually be Deus, and that was a cool fight. Wasn't super aware of Krellian's involvement, and his involvement was really fascinating to me. And I played Xenogears for this span of like 4 months, and I actually finished it the week before Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out.
Nice.
So this started what I call my year of Xeno, which is where I just have been continuously playing some form of Xeno game for about a year. So I finished Xenogears the week before it came out, and all of November I was kind of hyping myself up for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and that game came out, and I was absolutely floored by it, partially because I'm 17 and I definitely am the target audience for that game. I understand why people don't like it, and there are definitely a lot of flaws, but I was just super intrigued with the end game and what happened with that and how it relates to the first game. I also just really liked it was that much more emotional storytelling than really a lot of Xeno games have really done before. At least the Xenoblade ones, at least. So yeah, that's Xenoblade 2 is actually my favorite one. I could defend that, but I'm not here to defend that. Let's see. And then for Christmas that year, I got Xenosaga Episode 1, and I started playing that, and I remember that game, it was good. It was very quiet, and I've listened to the podcast, and you guys definitely mentioned how there just isn't enough music to make it super immersive. which I mean, the only Xeno game really that fully immersed me was Xenoblade 1, because Xenogears had like the Star Trek reference that I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so they literally mentioned like we're gonna get in trouble with Star Trek. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Xenoblade Chronicles X just isn't the biggest story. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has Chapter 4, which kind of took me out of it a little bit. And then Xenosaga just didn't really captivate me until Junior appeared. And Junior, the story of Junior, Albedo, and Negrito is very fascinating to me because I'm one of 3 brothers, and my 2 younger brothers are twins.
Huh.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of us I see in that trio. And it's never really fully explained which one of us corresponds to each. It's kind of a mix, so I could be Rubido one day and then Albedo another day. So it made me really connect with those characters specifically. And actually, this is where, for me, it's kind of ended. Xenosaga Episode 2 is next for me, and I'm really excited to see Junior, and I know that's much more from Junior's perspective, so really excited for that. And then I also replayed Xenoblade Chronicles X over the summer last year, and then I finished it with Torna in September, and so that was my year of Xeno.
Nice.
Well, that's really impressive. You got so into the series in just like such a short amount of time.
And pretty recently.
Yeah, I'm a lore nerd. I just dived in and didn't stop. And I know a lot of the stuff that's in Xenosaga Episode 2 and 3, so you guys don't need to worry about spoilers for me. I know about Zarathustra and Sakura and stuff like that, but I'm not really concerned about spoilers. I just want to experience them for myself. I mean, these are old games, so I mean, whatever.
That's true.
They're always
that's the series I know most about. So
yeah, so you'll make the difference for me.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's kind of great that you're on the podcast talking about your experience, because I think it's really refreshing to hear a take on the series from a younger perspective. Mm-hmm. Because like everybody that knows Xenosaga, it's like, oh yeah, we're much older. We're in like our 20s, if not 30s, even older than that. So it's kind of great to see, okay, here's a much younger person in their teens. They're picking up these older games and trying to get into the series and to see what us old folks are talking about.
No.
So I really appreciate that you're here, and I like hearing this. This is something that I don't often hear, and I'm glad. And because I always ask myself, what do people think of Xenoblade? Because I feel like even though Xenoblade is obviously appealing to, you know, a younger audience, it's a much more lighthearted story. It's still like the name Xeno is going to be the name that attracts an older audience. So that's why I'm glad I got to hear this, because I was really curious to know, like, how are newcomers learning about the franchise? You mentioned Chugga Conroy. I've actually known quite a few other people who've said, yeah, they didn't know what Xeno was until they saw his Let's Play.
Yeah.
Or they saw Smash Bros. And they saw Shulk. Oh, who's this guy? Who's this weird guy? Who's I'm feeling it? And even like his shirt's off. Who is this guy?
Yeah.
So they kind of like look him up. And so yeah, that's really cool to hear that.
I would call myself a little bit before the Smash generation. I'm much more like, I'm just slightly before that, but yeah, I'm kind of in that era.
I also like hearing like younger people's opinions on like the older games too.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They experience like you said Xenoblade first, and so like they go back and they look at Gears and Saga, and it's just like, wow, like how does this connect, or like do they even like it, or you know, sometimes it's just like,
yeah, I really like Gears. I can't give an opinion on Saga yet because I haven't finished it, but Gears is really impressive to me. It's my 3rd favorite game in the series under Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 1. X is my least favorite, but I mean, I've already explained my opinions on that a little bit. But I was immensely impressed with Gears. A lot of the stuff that's in it just really is really powerful. I know a lot of people give Disc 2 a lot of crap, but I actually really like it. There's a lot of really, like the writing turns to a little more like poetic kind of feel because they're dealing with a lot higher concepts.
Right.
And I really appreciated that. My favorite I actually have it written down on my phone somewhere, but my favorite quote is the very first thing that you hear in that Disc 2 when they're sitting in the chair and they're talking about dreams. That's my favorite line in the entire game because it's the duality of both Faye and Ellie, and that was really cool to me. I just like...
There's a lot of duality in Xeno.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of why a lot of people hate this too, because what is written is really good.
Yeah.
And I remember when I played it, I remember just being like, I think I was actually a little bit younger than you when I played it. And I remember just like reading all these events and all these battles that are described. And I'm just sitting here like, that sounds amazing. Why can't I play this right now?
Well, I mean, like honestly, for me, the biggest travesty is that a lot of the previous episodes were not created into games, and obviously that's a financial thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, episode 5 is like the climax that at least we know of, because they didn't write episode 6. So I'm glad that they made that. But honestly, sometimes I just want to like open up some Game Maker software and kind of recreate episode 1 into a kind of a fan game.
No, I understand that feeling. I felt the same way with like Xenosaga. I used to mess around with fan projects and stuff, and I always wanted to make like fan games for that. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, it's a great series. I love it all. There's not I know that I've listened to the previous podcast, and like some people aren't really as big on Blade as maybe some others. I find Blade really powerful just because it does a lot. Because when I first played Xenoblade, the idea of God being the enemy was super new to me, because I was outside of the era of Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, that kind of thing. I was outside this, like, I was just getting into JRPGs. The only major one that I'd played elsewhere was Earthbound. And that's much more traditional, like, entity of evil, and so this idea of, like, you're fighting a creationary figure. I'm Catholic, by the way, so that's why I'm here. But,
Okay.
but when I had to like reconcile a lot of things within my own like belief system, and it made me a stronger believer, and that's actually attribute a lot of my stronger belief system to the Xeno series, just because it's had me face a lot of questions. But it's all fantastic, and there's Xenoblade is just, it'll always have a space in my heart just because it's really well paced. Probably the best paced of all the Xeno games, just because budgeting wise, and Xenoblade 1 was probably the one where they were able to like create a full vision because they weren't as ambitious, I guess.
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they toned down their ambition a little bit, and they were actually able to make a full product. And so now that the series is successful, we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, then, well, I guess we're kind of already kind of segueing into this, so we'll just kind of get started, yeah, because we're here today to talk about the Xeno series and its connection with religion, which it's interesting because, like, even though, because back in the day, Xenogears and Xenosaga kind of wore religion on their sleeve almost with its references, especially Saga, but
yeah.
It's interesting because I'd really like to like hear like the discussion on Xenoblade, because I know that it's not quite as religious heavy, but
kind of. It's
kind of.
Okay. Well, I can just start. It's important to remember that there are 3 major inspirations for all the Xeno games. The prevalence of each is to varying degrees, but they're almost all present. The first one is Gnosticism, which is an ancient religion that isn't really practiced much today, although I know that there are some like secretive sects somewhere, but point is, Gnosticism is like this idea of like there's a false god because the true god is like a completely spiritual entity, and the god that created the material world is evil, and how people need to spiritually ascend to surpass this false god, or the demiurge as it's called. And that's a major, that's in every game, like without a doubt. In Xenos, let's see, the second inspiration is Kabbalah Judaism. This is to a lesser degree, but it's where a lot of the early Xeno games specifically get a lot of their Old Testament stuff from. The Zohar is a book, actually. It's the foundational work of Kabbalah Judaism. And the Zohar is obviously the monolith item in Xenogears, Saga, and Blade 2. So, it's called the Conduit there, but whatever. But the point is, there's a lot of references to Kabbalah Judaism. Kadomini is a reference to Adam Kadmon, which is like the first entity, if I'm understanding that correctly. And that's a whole thing on Kabbalah's Kabbalistic beliefs. This is probably the part that I know the least about. But
yeah, same.
It's interesting stuff. And then
the ODM mentions Buddhism as well. I don't know if you knew that, but
there is I guess I could definitely see a lot of there's a very kind of Zen philosophy to Xeno, and that like the idea of ye shall be as gods is like I interpret that personally as what happens when humanity gets too close to the divine, and
like a sort of like an Icarus story.
Exactly,
like
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I get you.
There's a lot of that where it's like they created a robot god and then it betrayed them, and then they tried to ascend to the upper domain with Zarathustra and it failed, and then there was the one where it's like he's trying to create a new universe and he becomes a god in himself, in which he's like hated by all his creation. So there's a lot of that there, and like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 emphasizes that on like the regret that you can have for flying too close to the sun, which I find super interesting because Xenoblade 2 is like
Saga has a lot of that too.
People
getting too close to god or divine power.
Yeah, I know.
Uriev.
Yeah, I know.
Uriev is like the big one.
Yeah, I know Uriev goes there a little bit. I haven't seen too much of him, but I know he takes Negrito's body. Let's see. And then the third major thing is pretty general Christianity, but also specifically Catholicism. I just specifically because they reference a lot of Catholicism, especially in Xenosaga. There's the Ormus is literally Catholicism blended with.
They literally like
right.
Yeah, it's
literally fight the Pope in that game.
Yeah, it's Catholicism mixed with some Gnostic beliefs, which is almost counterintuitive, but Xenosaga makes it work. And then like they have like scriptures on the wall and stuff like that, and the idea that Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's interesting stuff. So you said you want. So that's the foundation that we should go into. You said you wanted to know what was in Blade.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys wanted to, I don't know if you guys wanted to start all the way back at Xenogears or work our way up, or start at Xenoblade or work our way down, whichever would be easier, I guess.
I can do either, honestly. Whatever you guys feel like.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
it might be more interesting to talk
I feel
about
like this is
Blade.
going to be pretty long, honestly.
Yeah.
Each game is like has like a wealth of things
Right.
to draw from. So, I mean, I guess we can start at Xenogears. I know kind of about Xenogears, but like not really as much as Saga. Saga's the one that I've really like studied like very heavily.
So
yeah, let's start with Gears.
Sure, okay. So Gears is okay, so just going like Gears obviously the main antagonist of Gears is Deus, otherwise known as the Yahweh Interplanetary Invasion Machine or system. And that is like this god figure that they worship. And of course there's also like the ethos and the Nissan sects where these different sects of religion where they have different beliefs. Billy actually is one of my favorite characters in Gears just because I find his story extremely fascinating. I mean, Gears is as a whole is like it's not so it's Gears obviously is heavily influenced by Gnosticism because the wave of existence is a parallel to the monad in this Gnosticism, which is like this original kind of thing where everything originates from, basically. And then from there comes all the Aeons, which are like his kind of offspring that are less divine but are still definitely divine. And then there's one of these Aeons is known as Sophia, which and she tried to she kind of wanted to become a singularity, I guess, where she kind of wanted to become a monad in herself, and because of that she kind of fell from grace and she accidentally births the Demiurge, the creation god. And the creation god's kind of like secluded from everything else, and it creates the material world and it creates humans to serve it. And Sophia is like this character who gives wisdom, because Sophia literally means wisdom, gives wisdom to humanity, and her agents are I believe Lucifer or Santaniel in Gnosticism, and then there's also Jesus Christ, who is a character shown to kind of portray like wisdom bringing and like how to come to a fuller life. And like the greatest the main goal of Gnosticism is to become a more spiritual person and to kind of surpass God or the Demiurge. And the Demiurge has been interpreted in many different names. One of them is Yaldabaoth, which basically means one who wishes to become God, and then Yahweh, who is the god of the Judeo-Christianity faiths and Muslim. So.
I think Yaldabaoth is a boss in Xenosaga 1.
He's also in Xenoblade 1.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think he's in Xeno. I think they mention it somewhere in Xenosaga 1. It sounds familiar. I can't remember where.
I think it's a boss, like a mech or a gnosis or something, because a lot of the gnosis have names originating in like that sort of like mythology. So
I think there's literally a gnosis called Sophia, I believe.
I have no idea. I can't remember.
What was the final boss of Xenosaga Episode 1 called again?
Episode 1 was
Sophie Platos?
Sophie,
Pathos.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, I believe that is at least partially a reference. Yeah, Sophie Pythos. I believe that's partially a reference to no, okay, so I'm reading. I just pulled up the Xenosaga wiki. The etymology.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too.
Yeah,
yep.
It's a mistranslation of Pistis Sophia. Pistis Sophia is an important Gnostic text revealing the complex structures and hierarchies of heaven familiar in Gnostic teachings. There you go.
Wow, that's interesting to give a name of kind of a not super important final boss. But...
Yeah, so not. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and it's kind of interesting that last line on the wiki. It also says it translates to the faith of Sophia.
Yeah, because a lot of Gnostics take Sophia as like their kind of patron, I guess, where they reject the demiurge and wish to become closer to the monad and stuff like that. So,
bless you.
Something also worth mentioning is that it is a gnosis, and gnosis translated literally means knowledge of the spirit or just spirit.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense for Gnosticism, which is like a more spiritual religion. And then there's also agnosticism, which is someone who it hasn't really been, who's on the fence about the existence of God. So it's like between deism and atheist. Agnosticism basically means like kind of unsure of spirit, I guess. Kind of.
Yeah.
So. But like going back to Gears, there's a lot of stuff in there about Xenogears is mostly like a parallel about like a parable kind of like warning against almost rigorous belief to faith or like structured religion. It's not really against faith specifically. Billy is like very much a icon of someone who is like he's challenged by his faith and he loses complete faith in the ethos because it's like this conspiracy created by Solaris. But like his dad at the last minute is like, faith is not a bad thing, and I really related to that because there are problems in the all structured religion. That's how it is. Humans are flawed, but faith itself is not a bad thing. And there's a lot of philosophy on this, but I'm of the mind that faith is a beautiful thing. So
yeah, I thought that was that story arc was interesting because it definitely highlighted how humanity can definitely ruin and abuse faith, but at the same time, faith isn't completely pointless or useless.
It's not inherently bad.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just, and that's a conversation that bleeds to a lot of other things. Even today, we always have those kind of conversations with people being like, "Oh, screw religion because they did this or they're intolerant to this." It's like, well, you know what? You can't really blame necessarily the faith itself, but that also it goes into how people interpret it too.
Yeah, for sure. There is actually many different ways to interpret religion. When it comes to Christendom, there's two major ways. There's like I'm a Catholic, so we're contextuals, which means that we read the Bible and then we interpret its meaning. And then there's also fundamentalists, which everything that is stated is written. So if you ever read the Book of Revelation, it's a book heavily laden in symbolism. Fundamentalists will believe that everything that happens in Revelation will happen as fact. So like there's like a beast will emerge from like this sea, and Satan will like bring like this 1,000-year war against humanity, and it's crazy. But there's different symbolic ways to interpret it, and there's actually points I'll bring up when it comes to Xenosaga. Actually, this reminds me, in Xenogears, there's a really cool parallel to what Catholics call the sin stories of Genesis. The sin stories are these 5 stories in Genesis, obviously, that tell like humanity's fall from kind of a more perfect state to the flawed state. So the first one is a bunch of these are very famous, and some of these aren't famous. So the first one is obviously Garden of Eden, a story about like the original sin, and Xenogears tells that through its literal kind of Genesis tales of like Merkaba and falling from grace and like the battle against God, and that it's literally told in a legend form. And I
think that Xenogears is like the most Genesis story out of all the Xeno games.
Well, I mean,
by far.
It also
it's
Neon Genesis Evangelion references. I mean, that's kind of the point of that show too.
But yeah, it's like the beginning of it's like a new beginning, like the end of that game.
Yeah. So there's like that's the Genesis story. The second one that comes up is the story of Cain and Abel, and that literally happens in Gears with the Emperor Cain, and then the only human who survived the Eldritch crash, Abel. And Cain literally kills Abel, and then this causes Abel to be Cain kills Abel, and this causes Cain to be kind of like in a distraught form, and he kind of has this like consciousness problem, and he like kind of ostracizes himself from the rest of the world, and he's very sentimental to the characters compelled like the Gazelle Ministry, which is like super like focused on what their goal is. And Cain is like this, and Cain in the Bible is like kind of cursed by God, so he's not to be like laid a hand on by creation, but he's just like the wanderer forever. After that, I can't remember, it's either Genesis chapter 5 or Noah, but I'll just do Noah. The Noah's Ark story is obviously like where God floods the world, and Noah takes creatures and hides them in an ark. This isn't explicitly, this is actually the hardest parallel to draw from, but Xenogears has like Project Noah, which is its code name, and also the name of Krelian trying to resurrect God. There's also references many times to like the arcs, like where Merkaba, I can't remember what it's called, but the thing where that holds Deus is like seen as like this arc, right? And that's kind of like from like Deus is where all life originates from, so you could kind of see that, I guess. And also just because the Eldritch was crash lands, and this is where humanity emerges from, and they repopulate the Earth. So you could make some parallels to that. The one I want to talk about right now is specifically, which is I find the most interesting, is Genesis chapter 5. That is Genesis chapter 5 is actually a genealogy. It explains the history of people and like whose kids had whose parents had which kids, blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah, the begots.
Yeah, begot. Yeah. But what's interesting, so Genesis chapter 5 actually comes before Noah's Ark, so but whatever. But what's interesting is that one of the most major parts of chapter 5 is explaining how humanity's lifespans decrease, and this is Genesis is one of the oldest books in the Bible. And the idea of the afterlife wasn't super developed, and so the original Hebrews believed so the longer that you live, the more holy you are, right? So like people like Adam and Eve, Adam lived for 900 years, and like goes down and down and down and down, 700, 600, blah blah blah, 180. This is directly shown in Xenogears in the Zeboam era, where humanity only gets a lifespan of 30 years. And then they're wiped out by Myong because they're not seen as compatible parts for Deus, and she kind of restarts humanity. I find that super cool. And it's because it's shown literally through genetic deficiency, but you could also interpret it that way. And then the last one is the Tower of Babel, and there's literally Babel Tower in Gears, and which the Tower of Babel is a story about how humanity tries to build a tower to kind of reach the realm of God, and God creates language to cause confusion amongst all the races of humanity, and it kind of crumbles under its own weight. And it's also kind of an Icarus story, and so since it's a piece of the Eldritch, and you see the kind of the hubris of mankind, that it's also kind of appropriate. Maybe I'm making stretches here, but this is just what I've drawn from it.
No, No, it's really interesting because it definitely does have a sense of like the Icarus story of trying to reach too high.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the Zohar in general too.
Yeah, and like the entire theme of the series is "You shall be as gods," because that's seen in like the beginning of Gears. That's the password to get into Cosmos and Saga. It's and then in X, it's almost certain that's what Alma's password is when she awakens you from the Lifehold. So it's very much a very prevalent theme that Takahashi is trying to invoke, and I interpret it as because humanity has never really in the Xeno series we've never really killed an actual god. It's always been artificial ones or whatever. So like Deus is a robot. The final enemy of Saga 3 really is mostly Zarathustra, or at least that's what I understand. Zarathustra is like this machine that long ago people created to try and ascend to God, and it didn't work. They tried to ascend to the upper domain and it didn't work at all. And then Blade, a man became God, and that was rejected, and then Shulk rejects him being a god as well. And then X is kind of it's kind of like a reverse in which humanity is like placed in a higher role than the Ganglion, and the Ganglion tries to ascend and they fall. And then 2 is the aftermath of the phase transition experiment, where Klaus is like mourning his decision and how wrong he was, and that's probably the most telling example of it. There's a lot of hubris and like the Icarus story. So
now, going back a little bit when you were mentioning like Sophia, because that was, of course, one of Ellie's past lives was Sophia. I was interesting because you said that was it Lucifer was one of her creations or what was
Lucifer
that? I'm sorry.
In Gnosticism, Lucifer is seen as. Well, it's weird because it's actually portrayed. Lucifer is a heroic figure in Gnosticism because he's the opposition to the false god. Lucifer is in the Gnostic creation myth and stuff like that. He's also known as Sataniel, which is like a kind of like comes from the word Satan, but it's with an el at the end. Which, by the way, el means is a suffix that means God. So like that's why all the angels are called like Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, because they all have the el suffix. So Lucifer is kind of how he is in Christendom, where he's like this fallen angel who opposed God. But what's different in Gnosticism is he realized the falseness of the demiurge and wanted to try and oppose him, and he fell from that. But Sophia kind of helped guided Lucifer into giving knowledge to humanity, and that's when they left the Garden of Eden, because they were kind of like Gnosticism portrays the Garden of Eden as like a kind of like false paradise because it's like it's creation, and Sataniel is like a kind of more heroic figure because they're obviously opposing the demiurge. But there's also a lot of stuff to do with Jesus Christ, where he is also like there to nurture their spirits so they can ascend. And I believe even in some traditions that Mary Magdalene is a incarnation of Sophia. So there is your Xenosaga there. I highly recommend checking out Meeks' YouTube channel, by the way. There's a lot of content there about symbolism that you may just find super interesting.
Okay.
Send me a link, because I actually would like to watch some of those.
Yeah, they're super cool. I got into them a couple years ago. The first one that I watched was Of Monados and Monad, and that's why I got into this whole thing. And just kind of expanded from there. As for Sophia's place in Xenogears, that's she's plays definitely like a kind of giving. She's playing like a loving role and like one who's trying to help humanity kind of overcome like Solaris, but also just like kind of become as true as they can be, I guess. Like she's seen more of like a carer, I guess. Like she's taking care of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a motherly figure.
Yeah.
I
mean,
there's a lot of motherliness in the Xeno series too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot. There's like a lot of very. There's a lot of very like. A lot of motherliness in there as well. Yeah, for sure. Like with
and go on.
No, go for it.
Well, because that was what I thought was kind of interesting. Because I was thinking that would in that case be that like I don't know if this is right or not because I'm not really religious at all, so I might be grasping at straws
It's okay.
here.
It's okay.
But like with Lacan and slash Graph, do you think that he might have been like an interpretation of Lucifer then?
No. Well,
No.
not really. So, well, first of all, the Xenoseries doesn't really play too much with the idea of Lucifer. The closest that we have is Wilhelm.
Yeah, it's the closest.
Oh yeah.
But Lacan is actually a direct reference to Jacques Lacan, which is a psychoanalyst along the lines of Carl Jung, who termed the terms like persona and shadow and anima animus. So that's where. So I can't remember exactly what Lacan says. He's the one of the. Basically, Xenogears has the most variety of inspirations. You have Friedrich Nietzsche as like a philosopher. You have all three variations of the religion. You have Carl Jung, Karen Horney, Jacques Lacan, and Sigmund Freud as psychoanalysts to take inspiration from. And those are all seen. There's another guy I recommend checking out, the Dark Pixel. They're changing the name to Resonant Arc soon, but they have a really good Xenogears retrospective where they show like how they integrated like Karen Horney into the story, and that her ideas about neurosis were like it's children what they perceive their parents to be, rather than what they actually are, and that's where Faye and his mother Karen comes from. It's super cool stuff. There's almost every miniature plot point has some relation to one of these major inspirations, and it's just super cool stuff.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just thinking with how Lacan becomes Graph, I was thinking about how that was like after Sophia dies, that kind of spawned Graph in a way, so that was why I was kind of making that stretch. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking up Jacques Lacan right now. It's just real interesting stuff. Let's see, most controversial psychoanalyst since Freud. All right, let's see his works. Uses the term other. Let's see. You guys can talk if you want. I'm looking into this.
Oh. Is there anything you'd like to add to this, David? Because I know you're like...
I'm just thinking about all this right now because, like as a whole, like the Xeno series has kind of like handled, like I said before, the Xenogears is kind of like a Genesis story mostly. Like there's some world dooming stuff in it, but there's not like anything like the degree that Xenosaga has. But the whole rebirth thing is kind of like a big thing with Blade too.
Yeah.
Blade has kind of like new beginning stuff with it more than Saga does. Saga's like purely like the end times, which is kind of interesting that because I just see Saga as like a foil to Gears. Like there's stuff that's present in Gears that happens, and Saga just kind of does like just exactly the opposite. Like for example, the male versus female character, the beginning instead of the end, the ripples versus the shattering, the shards and stuff like that. There's like all this stuff that they just basically flip on, you know? And yeah, it's really interesting to think about some of the more Gnostic stuff because I'm not really familiar with it at all. I kind of grew up in like almost basically fundamentalist Christianity stuff, kinda. So, like, I know mostly about, like, the Gospels and stuff like that, and, like, I've read the Old Testament and stuff, so it's pretty interesting to hear, like, the sin stories and stuff again. I think, yeah, I'm waiting for Saga, really, because I know more about it than...
yeah. Well,
I probably should.
This is more of like a psychological philosophy type thing. I just looked up Lacan. He dealt with the idea of the other, and so he defines the little other is the other who is not really other, but as a reflection and projection of the ego. And he adds that this reason the symbol well, this is from Wikipedia, and then it's like the big other designates radical alterity, an otherness which transcends the illusionary otherness of the imaginary because it cannot be assimilated through identification. Lacan equates this radical alterity with language and the law, and hence the big other is inscribed in the order of the symbolic. Indeed, the big other is the symbolic insofar as it is particularized for each subject. The other is thus both another subject in his radical alterity and unassimilable uniqueness, and also the symbolic order which meditates the relationship between that and the other subject. So basically, Lacan kind of separates Graph from himself, and that's his other.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
At least that's how I'm interpreting it. I may have to do more research on this. Carl Jung is my specialty. Lacan is definitely not. So.
No, that's fine. And I know some Nietzsche, but that's because I was kind of a weird kid. I read Thus Spoke Zarathustra after playing Xenosaga Episode 3.
Well, all of Xenosaga's titles are named after Nietzsche's works.
Correct.
So
yeah,
I need to read into it just because he has such interesting ideas. Like obviously, like he does. Zarathustra is actually a character in is actually like the founder of Zoroastrianism.
Which is Persian, which I know about because
he's a Persian.
I studied Persian for 2 years.
Yeah, I did like light reading on that the other day, but you can go into that deeper.
It's kind of fire based, but it doesn't. Zarathustra is really just a name. Like insofar as I can tell, really, it's not. It doesn't really have like that much to do with like in Persia they have ziggurats. That's where the ziggurats come from. Is for Ziggy.
Yeah, Ziggurat.
Ziggy's name.
Yeah, Ziggurat 8.
That's Zoroastrianism. But like, I know it's a fire-based religion, but I don't like. There wasn't really anything that I could tell that was like super. Like, I guess, in relation to it. It was just a name, kind of like how
Nietzsche,
Deus was his thing.
Yeah, so Deus is mostly like it's like he's definitely in Gears. He's definitely like a major like superpower. Like even in the embryonic stage, before Xenogears happened, he could destroy entire planets. Deus is very much, I feel like, so obviously it's partially like a censored thing because the translator didn't want him to be called Yahweh in
you're right.
So
I remember reading on that.
So he begged he begged people to let them name it Deus, and they said sure. And they actually had to like the Yahweh interplanetary invasion system is called Yahbe because they just couldn't put it in. So that's a censorship for those if you're playing that Gears. I wish I knew what Raziel was, but I feel like I should know that, but I don't. But I'm sure there's interesting stuff with that. The trinity between like the Zohar, the Kadamani, and the and Deus is very interesting. I find it's not really any particular symbolism that I know of, but it's just like where God comes from Zohar, and the fact that it even called that monolith the Zohar is fascinating, even because it was originally in Xenogears. It was originally called the magnetic anomaly machine because it had weird magnetic fields, and they were able to, in the future, they were able to manipulate that into ether. So,
all right. Let's see. Is there anything else we can think of for Xenogears?
Not particularly. Try to think.
Okay.
I mean, I guess there is worth mentioning like Nissan about how like different it is from everything. I honestly I relate with Nissan a lot just because it's never explicitly said to be believed. Also, we should mention Krellian.
No.
Nissan is like it's never really, because while on the ethos side it's much more, you can feel like it's meant to be like worshipping like the Deus kind of god character. It feels like when it comes to the Nissan, it feels like they're kind of like worshipping more like metaphysical god, like how it is in the real world, and like the Nissan sect has never like debunked or anything like that, showing that that's like more of like a truer version of the religion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And
yeah, I kind of got that too.
Yeah, I mean,
it was just like
yeah,
Deus versus an actual like force. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And there is some beautiful symbolism in like the angels that like need to join together to fly. I that's very powerful imagery. Just
Oh yeah, the one-winged angels.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a ton of I can mention about Kabbalah's Kabbalistic tradition, but I'd probably mess it all up. So I have a bunch of information that I've recently accumulated, and I haven't quite organized it in my brain yet. stuff like Tree of Life, where like the paths of Sephiroth, and all kinds of stuff. So yeah,
Raziel's tree.
Raziel's.
I haven't.
Yeah, I mean,
really
I guess
figured all that out yet.
Raziel's tree could possibly be a reference to the Tree of Life, which is a.
So, actually, I'm kind of looking at that right now, Raziel. I'm on the great source of knowledge known as the Xenosaga Wiki.
Xenosaga Wiki is literally the best website in the world.
I know. There's so much stuff on here. So, etymology of that is that Raziel is actually a misspelling of Raziel, which is an archangel within the teachings of Jewish mysticism, who is known as the keeper of secrets and the angel of mysteries. Raziel's tree was based on the tree of the knowledge that stories of the Genesis in the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
So it is, yeah. So that's just something I read that word for word on here.
Well,
yeah. So just little.
There's another instance of the word L in there if you want. It's very prevalent. I think like the only like major angel in any major religion that doesn't have that is Metatron, who is I know because Shin Megami Tensei. Metatron.
Yeah,
right,
me too.
right.
Yeah, Metatron is like the messenger of God in some Kabbalistic traditions, and some traditions even go so far as to say that it is Enoch, who is like the great grandfather of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just random trivia.
And isn't Metatron also a boss in Xenogears?
Yes, he's one of the four.
Yes, yeah, he's one
orbs.
of the four.
Yeah.
He's one of the four pillars.
Yeah, 4 pillars.
Right.
Deus.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
I knew I remembered that right.
Yeah, there's symbolism in each of them. Let me bring up also the seraph angels that guard the.
Oh yeah.
So
Right.
See, the seraph angels were a little bit hard to grasp because that was one of the parts that I think was just written.
Yeah.
In Gears, and not really shown that much.
It's their Meeks on YouTube equates it closer to like a antibody system, like we're repelling. The seraph angels themselves, when you're talking about Christianity, is it's the highest level of angel. The angels actually have levels. There's seraphim, cherubim, throne, dominion. I think after that it's virtue, then power, then principality, then archangel, then angel. I think I'm mixing some of those up, but basically seraphims are the most powerful, most like the head, like the top of the angel genus, I guess you could say. And some Christian traditions even say that Lucifer, before he fell, was a seraphim. If you wish to know that. Yeah,
That's interesting.
It's interesting. Let me bring up the. I'm looking through the pillars. Sindelephon, Marut, and Harlut. Harlut's reference to Harlut, an angel in Islam. Yeah, they're all references to angels in Islam. They aren't really seen in too much in Christianity, but it's like yeah.
Yeah.
See, I've actually read the Quran. It doesn't mention the names of too many angels right off. It mentions Malak, which is the angel who's the guardian of hell.
Yeah.
But it's there's a lot of stuff that Islam believes in that it's not really in the Quran. I guess they kind of just pass it down.
Well, this is a common misconception. I feel like this is. I mean, there are some Christian traditions that do this, but it's a lot of people who view religion thinks that they completely adhere to the whatever religious text. So, like in Catholicism's case, it's the Bible. That's partially true. There's also what's called tradition. In Catholicism, we spell that with a capital T. Tradition is basically this. It's why the Catholic Church exists, because it's meant to pass down this tradition. It's this idea that there's a bunch of other teachings other than what's in the Bible that's been passed down through tradition, and what the apostles and disciples over the years have done, and like what they've interpreted. There's actually an entire book on tradition, which is the second most important book in Catholicism, called the Catechism, where it's basically a lot of kind of like guidelines and rules for how to interpret things and such. Really kind of cool stuff. But yeah.
They Islam also believes in these things called jinn. Which I've read about. It's like a force that's not really an angel. It's but it's where magic comes from.
Oh right, yeah, I know about the jinns. Yeah,
the jinn. And
Shin Megami Tensei
again. Reading that was really interesting to me, because I've been like Christian for like most of my whole life, but I was just reading it out of curiosity.
Sure, yeah.
And like it was a different concept to me, because like none of the texts that I had ever read like included those beings, the jinn or whatever. But
yeah, there's a lot of like metaphysical stuff that we just don't hear about in the written Bible, or stuff like that, just because it doesn't really matter. Because like the foundational belief in Catholicism is obviously like the existence of Jesus Christ. In Catholicism specifically, the idea of like the Eucharist is literally his body and blood in substance, kind of like we ingest that. And that's actually something that a lot of Christian faiths don't believe in. That's what one of the main things that separates it from Catholicism. Also, just like apostolic succession, so how it's passed down through the generations. And yeah, so there's just a lot of stuff that you just don't see because we've had to interpret it. And it's just really cool stuff. And then Krellian, do we want to mention, like, he's like classic Icarus character, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I know, I was listening to the podcast a couple weeks ago. I think he's in Childhood's End or something.
Yeah, Chris brought that up.
He's one of the overlords, which is what the aliens call themselves. But they all look like Satan, and stuff. So. Yeah,
I've been trying to read a lot more science fiction this summer, and I read 2001, and I read Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles. But I've checked out Childhood's End from the library like twice, but I haven't opened it yet. So been meaning to read that for a long time. I'll get to it soon.
I haven't read it either.
It's pretty short. It's not that long. I think the thing to really draw from it is like for Xeno is the idea that like we kind of like we can't force people to do things
exactly.
We don't want them to do.
That's free will. Yeah,
free will. It's basically that. It's that's the biggest thing to get from it, because it's just stuff happens in that book and it's just like out of the character's control.
Yeah.
And like that's something that, is like kind of in like Saga 2. It's just yeah.
All right. I think that mostly sums up my thoughts about Gears. I just think it's a really cool thing. I think the areas are super cool. I like Shavat a lot, even though it has a more whimsical tone. I really like when you first get there how it's like peaceful and tranquil it is. Like a lot of stuff about becoming like more in tune with like what God truly wants. So like there's like Xenogears, stuff like that. Just Xenogears in general just uses a lot of harsh language, like the fact that all the engines and all the gears are called slave generators because they're drawing from the Zohar. I just like there's a lot of it's really heavy, harsh stuff, but it's why it exists. It's really dark storytelling. It's good though, really good.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Then All right, then I guess it's time to let's move on to Xenosaga.
Yay!
I'll be able to offer a couple things, but I'm mostly leaving this up to David here.
So yeah, Xenosaga is like the thing. Like, first of all, I kind of got into it through Yuki Kaji's music, but the thing that really, really cemented me being a fan of this series was the religious part of it, because I could relate to it immediately. So it was really interesting, that, you know, the Zohar, this game is the Xenosaga Episode 1 is the first Xeno game where the Zohar takes the, kind of like the shape of the cross.
Yeah, and also like
And,
the emulators have Hebrew letters there.
Yeah, so like it's like a really big symbol in that game, and basically every Xeno game since then.
I mean, like the cross aesthetic had been in there since Xenogears with like there's two crucifix.
There's the pendant, but
well, there's also two crucifix scenes. One where they literally crucify all the gears, and then the second one they crucify Ellie.
Yeah, but it's like it's sort of like used as a symbol more.
Yeah,
It's like a symbol of power.
it's also just a symbol of Catholicism.
Yeah,
But
they use it kind of like as a symbol of power, because the Zohar is like
that's
what is it?
Oh,
that's not incorrect. Catholicism, at least, and most Christianity, I assume, the cross is, well, because this is how the Roman Empire would kill a lot of their victims. They'd crucify them, right? But the cross is a reference to is like as a symbol of power. That makes sense. It's a symbol of the fact that we have been freed from sin, and it's our triumph over death, because there will be like like this idea of like the second coming, where there'll be a last judgment, and we will be freed from death and return to our bodies and kind of live in heaven. This kind of idea. But basically, it's the cross is a symbol of Jesus' triumph over death.
Yeah, I mean that's you know what it is, you know, for a lot of people, but in the game it's really kind of like it's like a symbol of power, and like they kind of like use it. Everyone's trying to get it in Xenosaga. Like,
yeah,
all of these factions are trying to like get it, and it's something that's like it's something that's so powerful that if you touch it, you just disappear.
Mm-hmm. Even the emulators, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just incredible, like, to read about, because I just grew up with, you know, in Christianity, but
you could also take it as like a kind of like sign of temptation for like this like godly power that humanity could possess, and so like there's
and it does tempt some people.
Wow.
Dmitry Yuriev is like the biggest one, but Ormus is also after it. So the Pope in the second game kind of gets tempted by it, and he tries to use it for his own devices, but fails.
Interesting.
And Wilhelm is, like you said, like the closest thing to Lucifer in the Xenosaga series.
He's more of a like his like what's his gear? What's it? No, it's not like they're not called gears. They're called ESs, right? What's his ES called? Einsoff. Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's like references to like the Antichrist somewhere in there.
That's Junior. Junior's like the symbol for it, kind of, because he's the red dragon.
Yeah,
he's called the Red Dragon, and he's also got the 666 thing.
Yeah, actually,
going on.
I was hoping someone would bring that up. So first of all, the siblings, Rubido, Nigurito, Cyrene, and Albedo are all named after alchemical ideas of how you create like the perfect entity or the Philosopher's Stone, and these are like different purification processes, very spiritual. Like Negrito's like the one bring it to like to death, and then like white is the whitening, and then the red is like the ultimate. And then the 666, it's clear that Takashi is using this as like, since they're the URTVs, they're anti against Udu, right?
Yeah. So
right.
like, so when I interpreted it, like, I kind of like. There's a lot of like symbolism in Saga, but if you like interpret it kind of literally, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, but there is something worth mentioning in the Bible, at least according how, again, I'm doing this all from a Catholic perspective. In Revelations, it's important. When Revelations was written, it was indeed a book of prophecy about like how Jesus would like win in the end and everything. But a lot of a lot of the symbolism, like 666 is the imperfect number. That was also seen. It also could be seen as a number conversion of the Roman Emperor Nero, who is considered one of the worst Roman emperors of all time. He was like a tyrant, basically, and it was like the Hebrews' way of like showing like rebellion against him by creating like this demonic character to represent the emperor in their books. And like Nero's big thing that he like discriminated against was like Christians. That was his big thing. So that's I'll offer that.
Yeah. Like, so I don't know. So the URTV story is in Xenosaga 2, which you said you hadn't played yet, but
looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's.
I have a lot of patience with the gameplay. I've heard how bad it is. I have a lot of patience. I'll be fine.
Yeah, but the URTV storyline is probably the best of that game.
Yeah,
I'm really excited for it.
One of the best out of the whole series, I think. At least to me it is, because I really thought that, like, it's unfortunate that Saga kind of happened the way it did, but
yeah,
it's still very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like the spirituality of it is kind of interesting as well, because basically, yeah, the URTVs were created as like a kind of a weapon against Udu, or God in this case, really. And Junior is like, he's the one that has like, I can't remember if he has like the purest anti-waveform, or if it's like, but he's like the leader. Like they have to have him to be able to use it. So I thought that was interesting, and why, you know, he had the 666, or basically like what you said, like the imperfect number or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of use that, but it's difficult because the other URTVs are kind of like, they're not really given that much screen time, not as much as Junior. So
yeah, well, I mean,
Albedo's like the second most, but Negredo is the one who, I think he's the one who's supposed to destroy the Red Dragon
if it goes out of control.
If it goes out of control.
That's
so.
Wow. Okay.
And Albedo is a conjoined twin, and then Citrine is she actually has the same function. She said she has the same function as Negredo, but I'm not sure why.
Well, she's a female variant, so
yeah, but it's like a failsafe for a failsafe kind of thing.
There's a lot of fail-safes in Xenosaga, so
yes, there are.
But so a really interesting thing to me was Dmitry Yuryev's temptation. That whole arc to me was really cool. Like the whole Abel's arc part where you go through, and like fear is also a very big thing in Xenosaga. I don't know if you knew that.
But kind of gone, like, there's so much I haven't seen, but I'm looking forward to it.
There's like almost like a God-fearing thing, because there's like, with Udu, if you come into contact with Udu, like Dimitri did,
you go insane,
you get,
right?
Like, you get overcome with like fear. Fear was what it like. He didn't go insane, but he became overcome with fear, and it caused him to act outwardly in that way.
I mean, that's how Yuriev even developed the URTV program in general, was because it was driven by his fear of Udu.
Yeah, he was scared of Udu, so he created the URTVs in response to him going through the transfer experiments. Was sending human beings to the UMN, and he was the only one that ever survived.
Yeah.
And so
it's also, I mean, that's kind of interesting because Xenosaga is, like, from what I understand, it's the one where, like, the protagonists have, like, the closest thing to assisting in God's ideals and, like, what he's trying to do, because, like, there's Abel and Abel's arc. Like, I think
Abel's not really like that.
Like, he's observing, right? So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of on the side.
But like, everyone else is, like, very much, like, either, like, free him or, like, get like, reject them. But like, the parties seem, like, at least Shion, like, seems very, like, okay with Abel generally.
The party doesn't really, like, understand, I think, what's going on.
Sure.
On the same level that we're, like, explained to it. Like, they don't really, I don't think they get, like, I don't think the party fully grasps Udu in Xenosaga. It's not like it's present, and, like, he shows up, and, like, yeah, I think, like, Shion has a very unique relationship with Udu, which is kind of like a symbolization for, like, a relationship with God. But, there's, like, they don't really talk about Udu as much as you would think. And that's probably because of the way Xenosaga got handled.
Yeah, because, like, episode 1 and 2 were originally supposed to be a single episode, right? And then 3 was just really condensed.
But I don't really think they understand
Correct.
as far as Abel being a observational conduit for Udu. I don't really think the party understands that.
Well, isn't also Abel's arcs like a part of Udu as well? Correct.
Yeah,
Abel and Abel's arc are both observational terminals.
One is just one
Udu.
is in the real number domain, and one's the imaginary number domain.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I don't really think the party, like, totally understands that, because, like, when all this stuff happens at the end of Xenosaga, like, when they get to the end and, you know, they're explaining, you know, Mary Magdalene and stuff, everyone's just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but, like...
No, it's okay.
Don't worry about it.
Everyone's like, like, even Shion's like, what the heck do you mean, you know? Like,
Right.
But, they're not really... I don't really think they're, like, assisting, but, like with Childhood's End and Gears, like, Xenosaga is very much like a free will thing.
Sure.
Like, they get to the end and it's just like, well, we want to do this, you know, instead of, you know, what you decided, Wilhelm, because Wilhelm kind of tries to tempt everybody into resetting the universe.
Right, because that's eternal recurrence.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. I just think that in Xenogears, the party kind of, like, understands the situation a lot more by the end. Like, they reveal a lot of stuff to the party, like, Deus and all that stuff, and, you know, the Eldridge and stuff.
Yeah, like,
they reveal that. They reveal that to the party, and they're like, they kind of, like, react like that, but
it takes them a minute, but then they kind of get it, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, in Xenosaga, they're just like, you know, like, what the hell are you using Abel for? You know, like, to...
Yeah, I don't...
Like, they're like, it's just kind of weird in
it
general.
all kind of comes together at the end of Xenosaga, and it just kind of throws a lot of information, like, it throws a lot of information at both the players and the characters at the end of Xenosaga, and I can understand that's a lot to digest.
Fun. I'm a lore nerd, so this is completely up my boat.
I mean, like, Xenosaga 3 literally starts off, like, they recommend you read that giant, like, resource at the very beginning. Because it's like a time skip.
Guide. Well, there's a bunch of stuff. Like, there's.
No, but I mean, like, in-game, there's like a...
Oh. Yeah, he's talking... Xeno... You see, continuity-wise, if in case you weren't aware, there's a big time skip between episode 2 and episode 3.
I know about a missing year, but I don't know how big the time skip is.
Yeah, it's a year.
It's a year.
Yeah. And basically, when you boot up episode 3, it's like, here's everything that happened in the first game, everything that happened in the second game, and also here's a database, and all the stuff that happened in between is in the database.
Jeez, I have a lot more reading than I knew I was going to have to read Pied Piper, but...
Yeah. It's like, you start up the game, and that's like one of the options on the main menu, and you kind of have to read that, and there's a lot of stuff in there.
Alright, just gotta take a weekend and read through it. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Because...
Well,
I read through wikis.
As good as episode 1 is, and, like, I like episode 2, Xenosaga 3 kind of exists in its own little bubble that is, like, for canon purposes, because it, like, as an experience, it kind of, like, separates itself from a lot of the rest of the series for some reason.
Okay.
And, but I love Saga 3 a lot, and, it does, utilize, like, there's this, do you know what eschatology is?
Sounds familiar. Sure, if you mention it, I'll remember it, but...
Eschatology is, like a word in religious study that is basically it's basically like the end times, like Revelation and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, eschatology can really just mean, like, the judgment of everyone's souls. So, like, Christ dying on the cross for our sins and stuff like that, that's like an eschatological part of the Bible.
So it'd be like the end goal, like the destination, I guess.
So I think that, like, the eschatology of Xenosaga, like, starts when the Zohar is found. Like, that's when it starts for humanity, because the Zohar is found and Lost Jerusalem disappears and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. But, like, eschatology could just mean, can also mean, like a severe ideological change. For example, there is a sect of Islam called the Baha'i Faith, and they believe that the end times is every single time a prophet comes with new words from God. So they believe that, you know, the world has ended several times over, and they are just waiting for the next prophet.
That's weird. Okay.
Yeah. It's different, and like, Xenosaga is kind of like, you know, there's the Zohar that was discovered, but then also there's Wilhelm using the Zarathustra for eternal recurrence, and the Gnosis, like you said, like, there was, like, this huge, like, you know, the dead will rise and stuff like that, and, like, the Gnosis are very much the spirit form of humanity.
Yeah.
And so you probably know about that, but they're also Xenosaga's, like, explanation for entropy and space. And which was kind of interesting.
Like, I knew like ultra recurrence because all the souls in, like, the collective unconscious gets too much individuality and basically tears itself apart.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, Evangelion instrumentality stuff, but
well, like, collective unconscious is very much young idea, even though it's used kind of liberally in Xenosaga.
Yeah.
That was the thing about Xenosaga 2, is that, like, there's stuff that's there, but, like, it's hard to make a complete connection with some things because of the way that it is.
Yeah, this
like,
would be...
there's the Gnosis in Xenosaga 1 are more prominently, like, displayed and named and stuff like that in Xenosaga 1, and they're, like, actually, like, a force to be reckoned with, but then in Xenosaga 3 it's just like, yeah, this thing is kind of happening.
Wow, they kind of build up the Gnosis a lot in 1. I'm kind of surprised about that.
And they're not as important. Like, the characters are what Saga 3 decides to focus on, but even then they can't focus on them the entire time.
Sure.
So it's kind of like...
Well, definitely, the Gnosis were more important in episode 3 than they were in episode 2, because episode 2...
Episode 2 is like...
Where are the Gnosis at?
Yeah.
Well, let me. I from what I understand about episode 2, that's much more about there's a lot of it was devoted to Junior's perspective, so you have like a lot of albedo and.
Well, it's Junior's perspective, and there's also another thing to realize too is that there's a lot of events that happen in Xenosaga 2 basically, and Xenosaga 3 too. There's a lot of Xenosaga that's like told like retroactively, like this happened in the past.
Yeah, that's why I like the past a lot. That's why I like the encephalon so much.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely you'll find like something to like about the like the collective unconscious stuff in Saga 3 because of the Gnosis and stuff like that.
I generally know about it.
And I've got the and it's basically kind of got like a similar message to Gears, I think. I don't think that faith is bad in Xenosaga. The ODM actually has something really interesting to say about it.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring up the translation here because I got my ODM and I'm so excited.
Yeah. Once I get all the games, then the collecting begins. The only I have like the special editions for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the special edition of the music that was released in Japan. I got that imported, and then
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I didn't get the USB, but I got the Type B one. The USB only made 4,000, so.
Oh, nice.
The USB for
no, I did not get that one, but I got Type B, which was the CD ones, but it has all the same stuff. It's just CDs instead of the USB. So. Still rare.
Nice.
This kind of I guess I have the ODM opened up here. It's page 89. It's about it says Christianity, and it says the cross. It says in the Utic organization's military base Pluroma, there is a cross which indicates this place is involved in Christianity. Also, it is confirmed that both of the Utic organization's officers, Commander Margulis and Vice Commander Pellegrini, were wearing an accessory of the cross. And also, it is the same with Nephilim, who lives in the imaginary number domain. This sentence right here. It says, "It is not thought that those who wear this kind of fashion have chosen foolish behavior." And I was like, oh, that's like the most blatant thing that I've ever heard about it.
Well, actually, that they kind of followed that up in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Actually, let me bring that up. I was going to bring this when we got to Xenoblade 2, but this is probably the best part I can bring this up. I'm going to pull up proverb number chapter 1 verse 7. There's this appears around the world tree at the end of the game. It says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So basically, that's like saying like fear of the Lord being like respect and stuff like that. That's where knowledge and wisdom begins, and only the fools will fear that. So that kind of ties into that a little bit.
Yeah, I see that. It also talks about Buddhism and the ODM.
That's interesting. I'd like to read some of that.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
It says that it is also being confirmed that Tony spoke aloud the words Nan Man Dabu, and says it can be explained that they are the words that mean I lend my ear to the teaching of Buddha and I abide by it.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Interesting.
And it says ultimately in present day Buddhism has also taken root among people the same as Christianity.
Huh. Well, yeah.
And then there's...
I know.
What is it?
Oh no, I was just gonna say I know that like Japan, I know they're mostly Buddhists with was it 1% is Christianity?
Yeah, like Japan is very little Christian, which is why you get all these stories that use kind of Christian symbolism in a little bit more of a liberal way, because it's a lot less controversial over there.
Yeah. But go on.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Buddhism, but
that's the next topic I hope to tackle. That's
yeah.
Like specifically Zen Buddhism, like there's a bunch of different variants, but I want to look into Zen Buddhism because there's a lot of really interesting ideas there that would be appealing to me. Integrate that into a little bit of my own worldview, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there.
then there's this other page on the ODM I haven't read, which is God as a general idea. What is God? And like that whole thing. I can link it to you later if you want.
Sure.
Could you link that to me as well? I'd like to
link
it to everyone.
I'll
post in the chat.
I'll take that.
I'll look into that later. Is there do you recommend me finishing the games before I...
Oh shit, what? No, that's on my computer. That's why that doesn't work.
Do you recommend do you recommend us looking into reading do you recommend me playing the games before looking into it, or...
So my experience with Xenosaga was I experienced it and then I started looking up stuff about it. I think
I've kind of taken like a weird cross between the two.
Yeah, I find that to be like more like engaging because I don't know, it kind of like lets me like figure things out by myself, you know.
Sure.
But
I think either way could probably work.
Yeah, either way would work.
There's value to both.
Yeah.
Because, although you lose some of the plot twists, you also are able to, for Gears, I researched a lot of it before I actually played it, and although a lot of the plot twists would be lost on me, I can actually make sense of what was going on, so...
This ends part 1 of our chat about religion and Xeno. Tune in next time and we'll continue our discussion on Xenosaga and then on to Xenoblade in their relation to religion. Thank you for listening and take care. Bye.